What's your ghost story? I was around 10 years old and living in San Antonio. I got back to the apartment first after school. About 5 minutes of being in the place alone, I saw on the reflection of a mirror an older man in a tuxedo was in the kitchen. I flipped out and ran to my room and grabbed a bat. I waited 10-ish minutes before coming out. I locked the door when I got home and never heard the door open for someone to leave. I didn't tell anyone about it. Fast forward 6 years. I was watching Ghost Hunters with my family and my mom asked if I remember the old man in the tux. Crazy stuff. I stayed at my grandmother's house that my father spent a large amount of time in as a kid. My father drove us there in one go and was understandably tired after a 17-hour drive. We all started to lay down, and my father checked in on us before going to bed himself. As he was talking, he stopped himself and told us to cover a large mirror or you will have nightmares. Now, nightmares from a mirror of all things sounded like a little fun to me, but my brothers, who were also sleeping in the same room, asked me to cover it. I did. I asked my dad about it before he left, and he said ghosts use it as an entryway. A week later, I brought it up with my grandmother, and she scoffed saying, "Oh, this house ain't haunted." I agreed, but told her that the reason I brought it up was because my dad told me to cover a mirror. My grandmother then changed her expression and said, "Oh, the mirror?" Apparently, that mirror came from her grandmother. She worked as a nurse and took in those who were going to die but could not pay for care on their last days. So, she made her home into a hospice. Those who stayed in the room with the mirror saw things. A lovely old lady saw and heard a young lady come into her room and played a harp. She was thankful for the lovely songs, but no person was known, nor was a harp owned or heard elsewhere. A young boy found an older boy who played games with him and really knew his games. Lastly, a terrible woman refused to use the bathroom and shat in a cooking pot, then hid it under her bed, and well as argue issued everyone daily saw, and this is her words, the devil that spat fire at her. The police were called, and she tried to accuse the nurse of trying to kill her with the devil. I also got stories from my mother, seeing the same young lady who played the harp, without her harp that time, and my grandfather seeing the devil guy. My grandfather described it as a red man with horns that was too tall for the room he was in, so he, still standing up straight, bent his neck down to fit. It stared down at him and simply asked, slowly, "Why are you here?" I kept that mirror covered. When I was in 5th grade once I forgot to put my school uniform in the laundry basket, so the next day I needed it for school. It was dirty. I went to have breakfast in my pajamas while I was thinking how to tell my mom I didn't have my uniform clean. When I came back to my room there was a woman I have never seen before, in her 40s, brown dress, dark hair, ironing my uniform. I blinked and she was gone. I would have assumed I hallucinated the whole thing, but my uniform was there, clean, dried and ironed and ready for me to use. And it couldn't have been ironed by anyone else because my parents had breakfast with me and my sister was a baby. From the time I was about 12 to 17 years old I lived in what I believe was a haunted house. I've never had experiences like I had in that house since moving out. A few specific memories come to mind. Once I was hanging up laundry in my closet. I heard someone whisper my name in my ear, clear as day. I'd never sprinted out of a room so fast. Another time my sister and I had friends over and we decided to use a tape recorded to ask questions to the ghosts like they do on those paranormal shows. We played the tape not expecting to hear anything and could hear a very soft voice say, "I'm in the closet." We were sitting near a small closet in the basement. My parents eventually decided to sell the house. We moved into a new place before selling this place. My sister stopped by the house after there had been a couple of showings to turn out the lights in the house. She went to turn off the lights in the basement which had multiple light switches. One was at the far end of the basement away from the stairs. She turned off the light and swears she heard heavy footfalls of someone running towards her. She ran out of the house without turning out the rest of the lights and locked the door. That was the last time either of us went back until we were in the neighborhood and the new owners offered to show us the renovations they made. Nothing happened then, but they did ask us if we wanted to babysit their kids. We politely declined. This is my mom's story, but she is completely sane and I believe it. My parents went to South Carolina for a wedding. They stayed at some old plantation bed and breakfast spot. She was sleeping when she woke up all of a sudden. She had her cell phone plugged into the wall and was on her nightstand. There was a notification on the phone so it was blinking. The female ghost was dressed in a full-on old formal dress, and she was fixated on the cell phone blinking light and was walking toward it. My mom said it's okay, it's just a phone. The ghost turned and made eye contact with my mom, then disappeared. Years ago, two friends and I were camping in fall in a small tent, staggered with two of our heads on one side and one on the other. It was a silent and still night with fog developing in the moist PNW woods. What sounds like a muffled voice on a cell phone starts coming out from the center of the tent between all our heads. I heard someone keep asking, "Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?" My friend asks, "Are you hearing that?" At once we all sit up and start shuffling around in the tent looking for the phone. There is no phone in the tent. I look to my friend on the other side of the tent and ask what they heard. It sounded like someone saying, "Hello? Can you hear me?" We all agree this is what we heard and that the sound was coming from the other side of the tent. The next morning we find all our cell phones sitting in the car still, and there's no cell reception at the campground. Still sends shivers up my spine. I used to work at a museum that was once a functional prison. Throughout my 8+ years working there, I have been pushed, slapped, bit, dragged and punched by unseen entities. I always had problems when I would go to lock up certain buildings at night because you never knew what you would see coming around a corner. I went into the cell house once to turn off the lights, rounded the doorway to see a full-bodied apparition standing there in an inmate's uniform. A split second later, he vanished into thin air. There was a pretty notorious inmate who was involved in one of the riots, and his spirit would follow me around the grounds. One night, I was with a paranormal group, and we went into an area that we don't let the public visit because it's in disrepair, and we were screamed at to leave and something snarled at me. It was not uncommon for me or one of my co-workers to have shadow people follow us around, and we would even have some poor visitors chased out of certain buildings like maximum security by such entities. I have dozens of stories about that place. Whenever I get sick, I get the same nightmare over and over. Background story: my room has a bed with a metal bed frame, and I'm a very messy person. Anyways, so, when I get a cold or the flu, I get the same dream of a scary lady who seems to be in her 30s with very tangled black hair, fungus-covered skin and glowing silver eyes sitting on my bed frame. I can't move and she's just sitting and watching me for hours. She never moves, just sits there. Then towards the end, she becomes me and I'm looking down at myself. Well, one time I was extremely sick and all I could really do was sleep. So, one of the times I went to sleep, I woke up in the dream or in real life, I really don't know, and a gargoyle was sitting on my chest holding me down to where I could only use my eyes to look around. I was forced to look at my closet, which was very messy when I went to sleep, and it was exactly how I left it. The socks on the floor were exactly where I left them. The only difference was there was a 7 feet tall demon-like thing in my closet with yellow eyes, big claws, red wings with spikes and a dragon-like head. It walked closer and closer to me until I woke up screaming. I told my dad about this days later, and he said he had the same dream years ago. It was creepy because we both described the demon the same way, and my mom confirmed that this was exactly how he described the demon years ago. The only difference was that in his dream the demon tried to drag him underground. My dad passed away when I was just 8 months old. When I started talking, I would tell everyone that I see daddy. My mom would even walk in on me talking to my daddy in the crib. Strange thing is, my mom never taught me the word daddy since I wouldn't be needing it. To make things weirder, when I was 4 years old, I came downstairs and told my mom that daddy had come to visit me. I told her that he was coming to get grandma and take her with him. Not even an hour later my mom gets a call that my grandma passed away. My dad died a month ago very suddenly. We're native people so we believe in the spirit world. Little weird things happened throughout the week of his funeral. After we buried my mother's and his ashes together as they wished we saw 3 rainbows. Remember the double rainbow guy? I was 3 times full of joy as he was dead. We went back to my uncle's to relax. The door to their lower patio blew open. We all looked at each other. We woke up the next morning and fresh snow had fallen. It was very early and no one would have been walking around. We saw 2 sets of footprints in the snow in a circle. This is way up north so people aren't just walking by. What made me happy was it was 2 footprints. My dad had lost a leg in 2013. I was glad to know he had gotten it back. I have a few, but here is one. When I was 13 I was in front of my house in Queens practicing little BMX tricks on my bike. It was about 11 p.m. when I decided to call it a night, but before I did I wanted to ride my bike along the waterfront in my neighborhood. When I completed the trail, I saw a woman wearing a white gown standing in front of a tree. I stopped my bike because I saw that she had no face. I thought that it was either a mannequin or I wasn't close enough to make out her features, so I shouted, "Hey!" She didn't respond. I rode my bike towards her until I was about 10 feet away, very close, and still no face. Then her head turned toward my direction. I jetted and went home and didn't bring it up to anyone for years. 10 years later, my childhood friend saw the same woman with no face. 1 year after that, our mutual friend shot himself in the head a few feet from that very spot. About 10 years ago, I lived in a 100-year-old house. The dog and I were the only ones home. I went down to the basement to do laundry and the dog, a lab shepherd mix, followed along. She was just sniffing around over by the old part of the basement as I was bent down pulling clothes out of the dryer. All of a sudden she runs full speed out of there and up the stairs. I never heard any noise but definitely followed quickly upstairs. In the several years after that, we could never get her to come down to the basement with us. She was always the type of dog that had to be at your side constantly but refused to go down to the basement again. I think animals sense things better than us humans. Another time, maybe a couple of months after that incident, my teenage son and I, along with the dog, were watching TV in the living room. We heard what sounded like adult booted footsteps coming up the wooden basement steps. I was waiting for the basement door to open. Even with the TV on, we both heard it at the same time. The dog even lifted her head and listened. Nothing happened but freaked us out a bit. Residual haunting is what I think it was. Creepy though.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Reddit stories. Mothership will be glad with you.